when you fall for one of these scams, it's gone. So you've really got to be careful. Now, the first scam I could find was in 1588. So these guys aren't going anywhere. Can you believe that? It was about a man that was in the dungeon of the king's castle. He knew where the treasure was hidden, and he would not tell the king where the treasure was hidden. So the king put him in the dungeon. But if you would just give him a little money, he could bribe the guard, and he'd get out, and then he'd split the treasure with you. That's the first scam. So these have been around forever. They're not going anyplace. There was a lady in Green Valley that a banker was telling me this story, and this happened 10 years ago. Now, this banker is still working. She's the manager. So these have been around a long time. This lady received a letter from Nigeria, and it was from a gentleman, and he said, I have inherited this property. I have inherited $35 million worth of property, but I can't pay the taxes on it. But if you'll send me $3,500 to pay the taxes, I will give you $3 million back, because then I can have the property and I can sell it. Well, call this 800 number. She called that 800 number, and she started talking to this man. Well, as it turns out, her father, after World War II, was sent to Nigeria. He was sent to Nigeria to open orphanages and help build schools. And she told this criminal that story. Well, don't you know that he hooked her? He just hooked her in and probably said something like, oh, I grew up in that orphanage, or my dad knew your dad, or I went to that school. Oh, I'm so grateful. And I'll tell you what, he got all of her savings account, and she took a second mortgage out on her house, and he got all of that money. She died broke. But these people want you to believe they are your best friend, and they are very, very good. And if you're in a vulnerable position, you might believe it. So,
I'll have a hamburger, but we can have a classic,
now one of the first cases I had was a lady that came into the sheriff's department. And as I told you, one of our volunteers is the person that they talk to. And this lady wanted to know where the VIN number was on a Mercedes-Benz. And Sandy said, well, why do you want to know that? She said, well, I won the Publishers Clearinghouse lottery. And I won a $950,000, and they're sending it to me in a cashier's check. I've already been to the bank to see how long it would take to clear it. And she said, I found that out, and I won a red Mercedes-Benz, and I want to know where the VIN number is because I want to make sure it's not stolen. Now, this lady's thinking, and Sandy's saying, oh, please, that sure sounds like a scam. Don't fall for that. She said, oh, no, it's not a scam. I'm sure it's not a scam. I really believe it. Well, the sergeant that had been working with me on this poked her head around the corner and said, why don't you tell me that story again? So she told her the story, and the sergeant said, you be careful because that sure sounds like a scam. Well, she said, I've prayed about it, I've really prayed about it, and I feel really good about it, and I'm just sure it's the real thing. Well, the sergeant sent me an email, and the next day I happened to be on patrol. So after we got all of our house checks done and our work done, I said, let's go visit this lady, and we'll give her these 2 pieces of information. So that's what we did. I walked up to her door, she let me in, and I started explaining about the scams, and she told me what was going on, and I did get it out of her that she'd already given him $1,000. Because you know, it takes an attorney, and the attorney costs $350 to write up the papers, and then she had to get the vehicle through the port, so then that costs money for registration, and they are very good at the excuses they make to get money out of you. And as I was leaving, I stuck my finger in her nose and I said, okay, you've got to promise me that you won't give them any more money. And she said, okay, I promise. Well, as I was walking out the door, the sergeant pulled up, and she was walking up the driveway. And we both turned around at the same time. And this lady was looking at us. She was standing in her open door, and she kind of cocked her head. She said, wow, you're serious, aren't you? We said, yeah, we're serious. Well, the next day, the sergeant called me and said, have you heard anything? And I said, no. Well, about 3 o'clock, I called this lady. And she said, oh, they called about 9 o'clock this morning and they needed $10,000. And I told them I don't have $10,000. And then they lit into her. And this is what they do. They scream and they yell. They use foul, vulgar, terrible language, trying to intimidate you and scare you into doing what they want. And this man told her, now, you realize now I've lost my job and my kids aren't going to be able to eat and it's all going to be your fault and it's all your fault. I mean, he was just screaming at her. And she finally said, well, I'll give you $100. And he said, well, I'll have to go ask my manager because I don't know if that's going to be okay or not. Well, let me tell you, the ending of this story is she lost everything. Her house went into foreclosure. It's gone. So you just have to be really careful. What these criminals are counting on is that they'll get your emotions. They will get your emotions going because when it's your grandson, Grandma, I need help. Boy, that just grabs our hearts. And all we want to do is help our grandkids. So emotions are the enemy of critical thinking. They don't want you thinking. They don't want you reasoning. They don't want you using any logic. And we've got to remember, as we age, our social filters diminish. I think everybody's a nice guy. I want to believe everybody's a nice guy, that everybody's telling me the truth. Well, you know what? They're not. And also, as we age, our decision-making capability becomes lessened. And that's why they pressure you. Grandpa, you've got to go get that money right now. I've only got an hour. You've got to do it right this minute, or else I'm going to be in trouble and I'm going to be in jail. If you have anybody that pressures you into anything, you don't want to do business with them. I don't care. If they can't wait 24 to 48 hours, you don't want to do business with anybody. So don't let anybody pressure you. And I'll tell you, the same banker that told me about this lady that lost her home, she knows all about scams. She had her grandkids one day. It was on the weekend. They were putting their backpacks on and coats, getting ready to go someplace. She got a phone call. It was Chase Bank. He said, did you just purchase $467 from this company? And she said, no. And he said, I didn't think so. We've been following this company and we think it's fraudulent. So we will credit you back. Now, I want to make sure you have both of your credit cards in your possession. She checked yes, her husband yes, they both got theirs. He said, fine. He said, here is my badge number and Chase Security 800 number. If you have any questions, you call this number. He said, now I want to read your number back to you to make sure you've got the correct credit card. He had her number. Yes, it was her credit card number. He said, okay. Now just to make sure, read me the 3 numbers on the back. And she did. And the minute she did that, she knew it was a scam. She hung up, called Chase. But she's a banker. She knows, but they caught her at a vulnerable moment. She wasn't thinking. She was getting her grandkids ready. There was another lady one of the first ladies I talked to, and her husband had Alzheimer's. So she already was a little bit preoccupied. She gets a phone call from her grandson. Grandma, I'm in trouble. The cops pulled me over and they found drugs in my car and I've got to have $1,800 within the hour. Please go to the bank. I've only got an hour. They're only giving me an hour. Grandma, please go do it. And she thought, that's just not like my grandson. He doesn't get in trouble like that. He's the greatest kid I know, but he's my grandson and I love him. And she said, I have 9 grandkids, but he's my only grandson and I'll just do anything for him. So she gets her husband situated. She goes to the bank to get $1,800 and the teller said, have you called your grandson? And she said, no. And they said, well, why don't you call your grandson? So she gets out her cell phone. Oh, she didn't have enough power. The bank says, use our phone. So she used the bank's phone. It was her grandson. He said, Grandma, that's not me. I wouldn't do anything like that. And I'll tell you what, when she went home and that telephone rang and it was that criminal, she gave him the word, and I guarantee you, he will not call her back. Now, if you have any three of these ways of communication, you're a target. And when I first started doing this, I noticed there were a lot of widows I was talking to. And I thought, you know, widows that their husbands took care of all the money so they would get something from the IRS and didn't know if it was true or not. And as I was going, I was chalking up it was widows. And then one day, I met a man. And he said, ever since my wife died a year ago, I have been inundated. He had stacks of paper like this in the mail that were for 2 weeks. 2 weeks from lottery winning, the lottery, and all of these scams on his computer and on the telephone. And it just clicked in my brain. It's widows and widowers. That's who they're after. Well, who is more vulnerable? Someone that loses a life spouse. I mean, your emotions are up and down, up and down. Maybe you're isolating. Maybe you're just lonely. Maybe you just want somebody to talk to. And that's who these people are looking for, somebody vulnerable. And then I thought, where are they getting all this information? Well, my gosh, have you read the obituaries in the Green Valley News? I mean, there's all kinds of information in those obituaries. Your spouse, where you went to college, your kids, your grandkids, and then they get on Facebook and they find your grandkids. And I'll tell you what, those grandkids tell a lot more information than they need to. So you tell your grandkids not to tell everybody when you're on vacation and where you live and where your safe is and what the combination to it is. So that got me thinking. And then I thought, well, you know, when my father died, my mother didn't get anything like this. She didn't get any scam calls at all. My mother does not live in a retirement community. We are a retirement community. They are specifically targeting our area codes and our zip codes. Many of us are on a lot of medication. Many of us are in the beginnings of dementia or Alzheimer's, and we're still living alone. And that's who they're targeting. All they need is one. I have a neighbor who has been to 2 of these presentations, but I'll tell you, he's lost over $200,000 because he has dementia, and nobody took conservatorship over his money. So that's a lot of money. You just have to be careful. When you get that call and it says you've won the lottery, or you get that piece of paper that says you've won the lottery, remember something. You have to enter the lottery in order to win it. I got an email one day and it said, oh, because you've won $1,000. Because you shop at Safeway, Walgreens, and Walmart, you are automatically entered. No, you're not. So please remember that. We had a lady come in our sheriff's department one day to write a report. She received a phone call that she had won the Canadian lottery. But because it was Canadian, they had to have the foreign exchange and the taxes. She had to pay those taxes before they could send her the check. Well, it was $40,000. So she wired $40,000. The next day she gets a call and they said, oh, this is the Canadian lottery and we made a mistake. You actually won $1 million. Now you have to pay another $40,000. Well, she knew that was a scam, but she lost $40,000. And you don't know if it's Canadian or they're sitting in Moscow, Russia, they're doing this, or in Ireland or Jamaica or in Mexico City. All of these people, this is going on all over the world. A legitimate lottery will never, ever, ever make you pay up front. Remember that. So when your friend calls and says, or when you get on the email, I'm in the Philippines and I've lost my passport and I can't get home, I need some money, please wire $1,300 right now. All that means is there's been a virus in your friend's computer and they've gotten his email list. And we call that clickjack. You know, like carjack and hijack is clickjack, when that virus takes over your computer.